Hi, my name is Kurtis Lee Thomas, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and today on this episode, I'm joined by Kurtis Lee Thomas. He's a distinguished corporate mindfulness trainer and influential public speaker who's worked with Fortune 500 companies, elite organizations like Nike and NASA, and even the Capital Group, which manages over 2.3 trillion in assets. Kurtis is the developer of the Breathwork Detox method, which has gained national attention on the Today Show and was named the top employee well-being provider of 2023 by HR Magazine. In this episode, we explore how breathwork can help reduce anxiety, manage stress, and create transformative experiences. So whether you're looking to improve your mental health or just want to breathe a little easier, this conversation is for you. So without further ado, here's my conversation, and a productive one at that, with Kurtis Lee Thomas. Kurtis, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. This is a conversation that I've been eyeing up for a while. I wouldn't say I wasn't getting anxious for it, but I was definitely anticipating and excited for it. So thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
I love it. Thanks for having me.
So I'm looking at the book right now, Breathwork Detox: How to Thrive in the Age of Anxiety. And what's interesting is that the subtitle could almost be flipped: How to Thrive in the Age of Anxiety, the practice of breathwork detox, and how it can help you. Like, it's almost like the anxiety piece is what really caught me, because uh, we're living in a world. I was reading several. I mean, obviously with the work I do, I read a lot of books about time and productivity and articles and things like that. And I'm seeing this tug of war between the pace that we had years ago, and then things slowed down. And now everyone's trying to speed it back up again. And there's this almost like this pushback, because there's anxiety associated not just with we're not hitting the previous quote pace or speed or whatever that we did things before, but now there's anxiety around, well, what if I say no? What if I set boundaries? So let's first off, what got you interested in kind of diving into this anxiety laden kind of field? Because that alone can make one anxious, I would imagine.
Well, I think there's only one way people go into that field, and that is if they had crippling anxiety. And a lot of people don't even know they have it, which is the crazy part, because it's like this medical diagnosis. And, how the best way I could explain it in layman's terms is, you just don't feel comfortable in your own skin.
Right.
And you feel very, very awkward. And it was interesting for me because I'm a very much extrovert and an introvert. And I didn't know if the introvert was from the anxiety, and the extrovert was like, hey, I got to go out there and I got to be somebody and I got to make a living. And, so you have this internal struggle and conflict within yourself, and the dichotomy of the two. And, I just think more people struggle with anxiety than we are even aware of. And I know there's like 40 plus million Americans who do. And I think it's a little bit different for everybody.
Mm.
And it could be social. It could be, feeling discomfort in your body. It could be fear, because fear is like even worry. Worry is just small perpetual amounts of fear.
Mhm.
And everyone worries, and some of it is natural. Like, people say be fearless, right? And
Yeah.
that's not true. Fear is a natural emotion that you should have. If a saber-tooth tiger jumped out, it was like, you better be
Yeah.
in fear, because you gotta save your own life. But there's a lot of unnecessary fear that causes this anxiety, and it's this it's this epidemic.
Well, and the idea of fear being used in a way to incite action or to get you moving in a direction that maybe you don't necessarily want to go. It's just the idea of that's, getting activity taking place, right? That's why I'm not a huge fan of the term productivity as it stands, because it feels like it's activity for activity's sake, but it's not purposeful. It's not, it doesn't incorporate as much of the qualitative elements that you'd want to have. And when I looked at your book and saw the idea of breath work, I'm like, see, right out of the gate, you're gonna have people that are gonna go, I could use this, but how? Where do I
Mm.
fit it in? Because it's almost it's such a weird thing to face, this idea of, I know that, this idea of breath work, uh will help me, but where do I fit it in? And then that creates anxiety. So again, it becomes that perpetual thing you were talking about. So for those that are unfamiliar with breath work, how would you describe it? And in terms of the the amount of time or the investment of time one needs to get into breath work, maybe talk about some of either the facts around it or and the myths that you'd like to dispel.
Yeah, great. Well, the good news is everybody's doing it every single day, and we're doing it right now.
Yep.
So it's not hard to incorporate in your life. It just comes down to conscious breathing. We're all doing unconscious breathing. And well, some of us actually,
Yeah.
because I was doing unconscious non breathing. Is one of the things that got me into it. And I actually found myself in some moments in my life holding my breath.
Mm.
And I just remember it was my birthday, and one of my friends and his wife took me out to dinner, and his wife was so sweet, and she was telling a story, and I just remember this was the first time I noticed. She's talking, and next thing you know, I find myself gasping for air, and she talks, and I go, and then I look at my down at my hands, and my fists are clenched. And that's the first time I had the self-awareness to realize, "Oh my god, I was just holding my breath and my hands are clenched. Something's not right."
Right.
And I was at least, aware and conscious enough to realize that it seems like I'm holding on to something, right? My
Hmm.
fist is clenched. I'm holding my breath. I'm clearly holding on to something that needs to let go of. And I think that was the year I found breath work. And there's many different types of breath work. And even in the book, Breathwork Detox, I make a point not to give everybody the 2000 breathing techniques that are out there. So I look like Mr. Smarty Pants.
Right.
I like to distill it down into very, practical terms that everyone can understand. And I don't give people too much, because you give people too much, they don't end up doing anything.
Hmm.
So there are breathing techniques in there for the main things that we need. There's only like four or five. There's one in there if you're nervous and you have anxiety. You use this one to calm down your nervous system, to hack your nervous system. Now, if you're tired and you need some energy, and let's just say you don't have quick access to a 5 hour energy or a Red Bull, then do this breathing technique. I
Hmm.
use this one sometimes when I'm taking long drives. And it's quite dangerous to fall asleep
Yeah.
while you're driving.
Yep.
And it's happened to me. And it's like, okay, well, I need to do something now because there's not a gas station in sight. So use this technique. And then there's more powerful techniques that are so profound and cathartic, which is the one I usually lead with, and
Hmm.
I'm training people and certifying people, and that's breathwork detox. That is, it's it's just an easy three-part breath, right? Two breaths in, one breath out, but it's all done through the mouth, and it clears out all the things that people are holding on to inside their body. Now, this could be stress, it could be trauma, it could be energy stagnation that's causing discomfort and pain, all these things. And that is um, like I said, very cathartic. People do that and they'll cry out of nowhere because they didn't realize what they were holding on to.
Right.
And that was actually my story. I had a medical condition and doctors couldn't heal me, and they couldn't even diagnose me. And I was suffering for 5 years, and colonoscopies, endoscopies. I swallowed like 3 pill cameras. I did all this crazy stuff, and nothing would do it. I even went to the jungles of Peru and drank ayahuasca with my mother, and I tried everything. I was very desperate, and
Right.
I found this one specific breathing technique, and in this technique I released all this energy. Like I cried, I was laughing, and it healed my stomach condition in one session. And that's actually how this was all born. Once I could wrap my head around how a little stupid breathing technique could eradicate something that the best doctors from LA to New York couldn't do, it took me a long time to wrap my head around that. And once I did, I said, you know what? I'm exiting all these companies that I'm a part of and all these things that aren't purposeful, and I'm bringing this to the world. And that's when I started writing the book. And I wanted to give people other techniques as well, not just this huge, powerful one, but ones that they can use to also maintain, their mental health and their mood.
Why do you think people would dismiss the idea of breath being so powerful in terms of kind of again helping you with a condition that no one else could? getting past bouts of anxiety that have been crippling. I mean, you talked about worry. Well, worry compounded can become it once it's got that perpetuity, it becomes anxiety, overwhelm, all those things that are external. How how does someone who is, let's say, skeptical of the idea that, hey, breathing, that's it? Like this thing that we have available to us for free is something that is so um not just accessible, but it's advantageous to leverage. What do you say to the people who, I mean, obviously the book is going to go through a lot of this stuff too, but if someone's like listening right now going, okay, I mean, I could tell you, as a night owl, one of the things that I found really impressive about one of Tony Robbins's programs years ago was the breathing to get going at the start of the day. As a night owl, I suck at mornings, and to do like just to get that going, which, and by the way, I will tell you that when I did it, I felt at first incredibly uncomfortable because it wasn't natural, right? So it wasn't as
Mhm.
effortless, but also people look at you. Like there's going to be that, like, I mean, once you get past that, it's okay. But there's all of those things, especially if you're if you're in an office and you apply breath work and people are like, first off, meditation alone, people are like, why are you closing your eyes? Are you sleeping? Like, no, no, I'm just meditating. Well, okay, we'll get through the meditation and get back to work. It's like, no, that's not how meditation works. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences in a bit here. But for somebody who's like, yeah, this sounds good, but how do I make it accessible for me and try to break through some of those biases or noise surrounding it?
Yeah, I love your first question. And the answer is they won't be able to get over it because no matter if you read the book, I think if you're a logical learner, and you will learn a lot from that book. I kind of put everything that you need to know in one place. But even if you read the book and even if you listen to this podcast, you're still not going to understand the power of the breath until you go through the breathwork detox experience. Like
Mm.
that. So that's the reason why I lead with that one, because
Right.
what that one does, it blows open your mind of what's possible. And there's no exceptions. And even the strongest minds, people who have the greatest resistance, and I'm talking, I've done this for marketing agencies and companies like Nike, and they're very kind of hip, they're right brain, they're creative. It's a lot easier for those people. But when you get into people who are like in finance, right, and people who are like, let's just say we actually did an event for NASA,
Hmm.
and we did it for rocket scientists, very left brain people. And then, another financial company that managed 2.3 trillion in assets. I think they were called the Capital Group. These are the ones that are the true test. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you go through this process, the results are immediate and undeniable for anybody. They just have to do this technique for the exact amount of time that that you're supposed to, and it's gonna work. And I think that's what makes people a believer. That's the only thing that made me a believer. And there's many other techniques that you can use. I've used one that actually got me out of a panic attack when I was on actual pills. And I remember I went to the doctors, and the doctor was my doctor was gone, and it was a substitute doctor,
Right.
and I was on Ativan at the time. And then she's like, Curtis, how you doing? She's like, what's going on? I tell her what's going on. And it was just a bad year for me that year. Like my house burnt down, like I lost my brother, like all this crazy stuff. And I was just like a mess. And she's like, all right, listen, I'm gonna prescribe you. I'm gonna give you what you came here for, but I want you to know you're on a dark path. And I was like,
Mm.
dark path? What does that mean? Like, I'm a Star Wars fan. I don't like to hear that. So she starts telling me, you actually trigger more anxiety attacks when you take the Ativan, because it's a quick fix, and your brain will think that you need it, and you develop a relationship bond, chemical bond with it. And what she said really made sense. She goes, I'm going to show you a breathing technique next time you have one. And she told me the straw breathing technique. And you pretty much breathe regular in and out as if you're breathing regular, except you put your mouth like a kissy mouth, like a
Yeah.
fish, and you pretend you have a straw in your mouth, and you breathe normal in with the straw in your mouth and normal out. And what that does is it regulates the perfect amount of oxygen and CO2 into your system. That regulates it, because when people go into panic attacks, they're taking in too much
Right.
air.
Right.
And people think when you're having a panic attack, oh no, just breathe, just breathe. No, actually, like they have too much oxygen in their system, because they go, they're bringing all that oxygen into a sympathetic and they're freaking themselves out. So this is why they have them breathe in the bag, because it's regulating the CO2,
Yeah.
and that's what makes them calm down. So, anyways, 3 o'clock in the morning, mind you, my house burnt down, so I'm sleeping in my mother's basement, and my panic attacks were so bad, I had a bell by my bedside that when I was having a panic attack, I could ring. So my mother, mind you, I'm a grown man. So
Hmm.
my mother could come down and comfort me. And I don't know, I guess only people who actually experience the panic attack know what I'm talking about, because it feels like death.
Right.
It's really, really bad. And I just remember I woke up 3:30 in the morning and I went to grab my pills and I, put like four of them in my hand, and I just heard that lady's voice, "You're going down a dark path." And I was like, "Oh no." So I actually went back to this technique, and I started doing the technique, and I feel like I'm gonna pass out, I feel like I'm gonna die. And then just the moment I was gonna quit, it was like it's like a pops
Right.
something. I just remember hearing like pop. And then next thing you know, all my vitals begin to relax. And not only did it go down, I felt a sense of calm and safety. And I was only doing that technique for like, I don't know, maybe like 15, 20 seconds.
Hmm.
And at that moment, I was like, wow, the breath is super powerful. And I didn't take any Ativan or anti anxiety medication since then. So, that was mine. Now, going back to your question, how do we make this accessible? Well, you can carry a straw in your pocket,
Good.
and
Yeah.
there you go. There's one right there. There's all types of other techniques. I think the one that's most overlooked is the sigh,
Mm.
and you could do that. When you're driving, even though I don't recommend doing anything when you're driving, but you could do that when you're in your computer desk. I do something when I walk through doorways. I'll do it, and all you do is take a big inhale, and you just let out this big, loud,
Mm.
obnoxious sigh. Now, the reason why that's so underrated is because if you look at what the body naturally does, when the body naturally has excess stress
Mhm.
or too much pain or tension, what it does is it builds, it builds, it builds, it builds, it builds, and then all of a sudden you let out this release pressure valve and you do a sigh of what? A sigh of relief.
Relief. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So why not actually do that? And that's how you hack your system, is that any stress that's building up in your body, you consciously do a sigh, and you'll immediately feel all of your stress and tension leave you with just three sighs. Do three intentional sighs in a row, and you'll notice a huge difference.
It's funny. I sigh quite a bit, and my household, everyone's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Like it's so funny. I'm like, and they're like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine." Like it is almost right. It's like a pressure valve release of like, okay, there's a lot going on. And what I like about what you said about the three is that I think if you sigh, I've experienced this when I sigh, and then it's almost you can get right back into that immediate state of anxiety or overwhelm unless you have a longer break. So in other words, I could take that sigh and go, and then unless I sit with it, then everything comes back in. So the three allows it to kind of take hold a little bit longer and keeps because normally when I'm sighing, it's because of, oh, there's this to do and there's that to do and there's that. Oh, and I see this thing now. And that's when the sigh comes in, right? So it's almost like, okay, I know where my pressure lies. It's interesting. Um, let's talk about meditation. So I think I, I've I have a good relationship with meditation. It could be better. I know that when I meditate, life is better. And I also I've become aware because I've practiced it off and on for a number of years that one of the things that people struggle with their relationship with meditation or even meditating in general is this idea of, but it didn't solve the thing right away. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, or, oh, there's too many thoughts in my head, therefore it's not working. But, meditation and all, I've got plenty of shows where we've talked about the benefits of meditation. But for those that are like, okay, but what is breath work versus what is meditation? Because meditation does involve breathing. What are some of those differences that people would need to know? Because I think that, again, people will make the correlation of, oh, so breath work is like meditation. I already don't have time to do meditation, which there's a whole bunch of stories that you could go into about that. So let's create some of that distinction there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, of course they have the time. We all have the time. Super high achievers who are, achieving all these things. They have the time. They just find it. They just find ways to find the time
Yep.
and optimize their time. But I think the real reason is it's boring.
Yeah, no,
you know,
no,
we-
absolutely. It's so, I mean, and only when you're with it, you have to work through the boredom. It's like you said about the, like you're breathing and all of a sudden it finally worked after X number of times. And finally is 15 seconds. Like that's how our brains are wired at this point, right? Like finally it worked. It only took like less than half of a commercial for it to, perhaps the commercial that you've heard during this episode, for that but you're right. Like it's like this and I've been reading a book called The Scent of Time by Byung-Chul Han, and just talking about we are terrible at acknowledging that we do not measure time very well, like especially in moments of stress, and especially in moments of anxiety or overwhelm. And we don't do it particularly well when we're not. We don't really understand how much. So boredom, yeah, you're right. Like that's a huge one. That's obviously something that can come up any period of inactivity, I guess. And there's the talk about reclaiming boredom and all that stuff. But yeah, like that'd be a good
yeah,
example.
yeah, and the boredom, but meditating isn't hard. It's deciding that you're going to sit down and meditate is the hard part.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then once you make that decision to sit down, then you're just sitting there. You don't have to, connect to higher beings and, gather all this like super important intel. I mean, you just got to sit in quietness and still the mind. And the whole point of meditation is to focus on one thing. It's and that one thing could be one color, one shape, one sound, one thought, whatever it is. It's just taking that barrage of thoughts that we have, which is about 55,000 thoughts per day, and distilling it down to just one thought for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes,
Mm.
and just becoming real still so the mind doesn't go all over the place. Now, there's a much it's very different with breath work. And I will say this, I will say that I believe meditation is an advanced practice compared to breath work,
Right.
because the majority of the world, my opinion, but also statistically supports this, they're stressed out. The world is stressed out. And if you try to get somebody who's stressed out already to sit down, sit still, and don't think a thought for the next 20 minutes,
Yeah.
they're going to get more stressed out.
Hmm.
And they're like, I'm not doing this right. This sucks. And they feel like a failure. Now, breath work, if I was to give an analogy, breath work, let's say we're cleaning our car. Breath work is like cleaning your car with a power washer. And meditation is like cleaning your car with a toothbrush. And people are trying to clean their car with a toothbrush.
Yeah.
And if they were just to know about deep diaphragmatic breathing, which cleanses all your energy centers, all your stuck emotions, if you were to do that and develop a very short, and you'll get results immediately. You do that first. Well, two things are going to happen. One, it's going to be a whole lot easier to do meditation, and it's going to become more enjoyable. So power wash your car with breath work, and then use the meditation as the maintenance.
Yeah.
That toothbrush to find, just
It's like the
fine brush.
detail. It's like the detailing. It's like the detailing of the car.
Detailing,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so that's my take on it.
One of the things as you go through the book, and the way the book is structured is interesting, because you kind of the middle this basically it's almost like, well, maybe a little bit earlier than smack dab in the middle, about a third of the way in, you're like, okay, let's get into the 101s of breath work. Like I'm gonna, because you're breaking down beliefs, either misconceptions or what have you, the biases that have been forged over the years of, you know well, how can this be helpful? But what I found also fascinating is just some of the things that we do to get feelings of euphoria or clarity, that actually work against us. So, that bottle of wine, that glass of wine at the end. Bottle, that's a bit different, right? That's power washing your liver, I imagine. No, but the the glass of wine, or depending on where you are, parts of the world, marijuana, right? Like, there are escape mechanisms. And one of the things that stood out to me is, you as you go through, once you get past the breathwork 101, you go into very specific, like, these are some of the benefits that you might not consider. And I mean, the first thing I noticed was breathwork is trippy, like that idea of, there's this euphoric element. Um so when, for someone that starts to adopt the practice of breath work, when do they start to see, it's kind of, again, like with meditation, they start to see some of the those aha moments that, they don't just come out of nowhere. I mean, you get the one that kind of, you know makes it take hold, but then with sustained practice, it's going to unlock a whole bunch of other things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just depends on someone's, level of awareness. And, because you can do that straw breathing, you can do the sigh and immediately just say, wow, just a moment ago, just 30 seconds ago, I was feeling this way. You do these three sighs, and then you say, how do I feel now? Wow, I feel actually much better. Well, there it is right there. There's your proof,
Yeah.
you know? And the breath work is trippy. That section of the book, I'm talking about the deep diaphragmatic breath work, which is
Right.
like level 10. It's a simple technique. I only say level 10 because it produces the most profound results that I've ever seen across the board. And, mind you, I was already a certified life coach, certified hypnotherapist, certified NLP practitioner, Reiki master, sports science fitness professional. I had all these certifications I was collecting. So I understood transformation and, alternate modalities and, plant medicines, all these things. And I'm still mind boggled of how a breathing technique could produce more powerful, profound results in all of those things. And one of the things that allows this transformation to occur so rapidly is what you mentioned. DM Breathwork is trippy because there's something called DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, which is naturally produced in every plant, animal, and human being, on the globe. And but it's very mystical. They did a whole Netflix documentary on this thing, and they call it the spirit molecule. And it's responsible for mystical experiences in life, and it's also responsible for launching us in the greatest um 3D reality, virtual reality ever known, which is the dream world.
Mm.
So when we dream, the pineal gland will secrete small doses of dimethyltryptamine, and that's what allows us to go into these alternate realities. And we believe it's real until we wake up in the morning and be like, oh, okay, that was a dream. We go about our life. But that is the most amazing, dreaming is the most amazing thing ever. And that compound is responsible for it. Well, the lungs actually produce more DMT than the pineal gland. So when you do this specific technique that I teach people, you begin to microdose this dimethyltryptamine. And some say that, some studies I was reading saying that when it's the DMT is produced, it's very close and binds to the serotonin receptors. And I was looking for research because I was trying to find out why people feel such bliss and euphoria. They'll just feel so much joy, so much bliss and euphoria, and it's due to this process. And another reason is when you secrete this, it begins to give you these mystical experiences. And I've witnessed all types of amazing things. People who had communicated with lovers or mothers or fathers who had crossed over and they visited them. And that, mind you, we're talking like Christians. We're talking
Right.
like, people who are very much not, very much against that stuff and don't believe in that. And they had their own experience. And when you have your own experience, that will make you a believer. And, beautiful things, happen. And it usually begins to kind of trigger right. I say halfway to 3/4 of the way
Hmm.
through the process is when that magic happens. And another thing that happens in the brain is the breathwork technique activates transient hypofrontality, which is a very fancy word for flow state.
Okay.
So
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is like that executive decision maker that says this is good, this is bad, I'm me, you're you, that quiets down, and then now all of a sudden people feel this connectiveness and this oneness that they didn't feel before, and all this stuff starts to happen right around the same time. And this is when transformation happens, because now you're elevating your consciousness, you're seeing your life from a different perspective, and really perspective can completely shift your reality and help you heal and forgive people who you couldn't forgive. And one of my great stories is Mark Victor Hansen, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul,
Hmm.
who has like, I think that's the Guinness Book World Record of more copies sold. Than they sold like 500 million, half a
Wow.
billion
I
copies.
think it's the biggest
But he,
series. You're right. Yeah, like one of the
the
biggest
biggest series,
series.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So he went to one of my retreats. Well, I was hired to do a men's retreat, and there's a lot of high performers there. He was one of them, and he came up to me afterwards. He says, "I need your email." I was like, "Okay." He goes, I'm still processing, but I need to talk to you."
Hmm.
So he ended up emailing me. He goes, "Kurtis, I've seen and witnessed and facilitated all different modalities, and he's one of the gurus of this self-help." And he goes, "That session I did with you, that one session, allowed me to heal and forgive somebody that I couldn't forgive for over 30 years." And I had to reach out, and I said, just to say thank you so much. And I was like, "Can I use that as a testimonial?" I was like, "I need that for my website." He's like, "Absolutely." I was like, "Okay, cool." So, so many amazing things happen. I just love what I do.
Well, and I mean, there's so many more things we can get into. I know I want to be respectful of time, both of yours and the listener, but the idea of chi, which is something that what the way you've structured the book is kind of like the way I like it. The way I like the fact that you structured it in such a way that's like, hey, this is accessible. Here's how you do it, and then here's some things to look at as to why this stuff is working. Like, my wife being an acupuncturist, I've been privy to hear more about chi and things like that over the years. And again, when you live in a world where Western medicine is promoted at a much higher level than, say, some of the more alternative styles, and even the alternative styles that have been around for millennia, it is fascinating to know that the pills don't work all the time. And I mean, that's not to say that people who don't need them shouldn't have them, but there are other ways to look at things. And the fact that breathing is the thing we do effortlessly for most of our lives, the fact that you can use it to quote detox and also just tap into things that will not only help you achieve but lower your anxiety at the same time. Like, those are huge wins. So before we wrap up, um what would be one thing if someone wants to start to tap into this beyond picking up the book? What's a simple exercise that they could do today, as soon as they're done listening to this, that they could start to see some of the benefits right out of the gate?
Yeah, I mean, I would say what we already discussed, which is it's very tangible, is the sigh. Do 3 sighs, and then see how you feel before and after. That's number one. And then number two, you don't actually need the straw to do the straw breathing, but just pretending that you have a straw in your mouth and breathing in, and just doing that for, let's just say, 4 to 8 cycles of in and out. And you're gonna notice, just be like super aware of your state, and from when you start to when you finish, and that just makes you a believer. And you say to yourself, like, wow, I can actually do this anytime that I want to. I'm more in control of my thoughts and emotions and feelings than I think I am. And there's plenty of choppy waves, and all these tsunamis, but you can actually surf them. And this is like a cool way to do so. And I just tell people, have fun with it.
Curtis, this has been great. The book is called Breathwork Detox: How to Thrive in the Age of Anxiety. Where can people pick up the book, and where can people keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon, and you can go to breathworkdetox.com, and you can connect with me. There's all types of things there. Actually, um, I do virtual breathwork events every 2 weeks online, and people from over 27 countries log on, and they go through this amazing transformational experience. So if someone is interested in that, actually, for your guest, I did a 50% off code specifically for your guests, so they can put in Mike 50, and they get 50% off their venture. And yeah, you can reach out to me, Instagram, Man from the Stars. I'm very I'm out there. I'm searchable and Googleable. Googleable.
Kurtis, thanks so much for taking the time to have a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You can now breathe a little easier after listening to this conversation. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did. And I want to thank Kurtis for joining me on the program today. You can check out all of the relevant show notes, links, etc. at mikevardy.com/podcast547, or you can just check out the show notes wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Overcast, wherever you are listening to your podcast, you'll be able to find the show notes there. While you're doing that, subscribe to the show. That way you won't miss a single episode of what's to come. And when you subscribe, now you get double the content every single week because we have the Flashback Friday episodes. Now, this coming Friday, as of this episode dropping, we have a Flashback Friday episode from a previous podcast I did, Productive. Yes, that's a mouthful, with Leo Babauta. And Leo joining me on that program. You get to hear some of the stuff that we talked about way back in the day, but also we have a bit of an update on what's been going on with Leo as well. So that'll be shared in that episode as well. You don't want to miss it. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast. It's one way to support the show. Another way to support the show is to check out the sponsors that you heard during today's conversation. Go to mikevardy.com/podcast sponsors. Click on any of the sponsors that you feel relate to you or you're excited by, and that way they know that we sent you. That's it for this episode of A Productive Conversation. Thanks once again for joining me. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.